You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. What's up, listeners? Happy Wednesday. Today's podcast is with Luki Danukarjanto, the Chief Career Catalyst at Focus.Inspired and the author of a career book titled Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the acronym being SWIKE. Luki is on a mission to help millennials redefine their career journey as a coach, but he also has aspirations to create a new form of education in the future, one that's much more based on the practical rather than the theoretical. Luki's story is one filled with cultivating humility, honestly, through disappointment and just making decisions following his own curiosity. And we just really see that earlier on, just from his transition from earlier days in his education all the way into his career later on. We journey through his personal development, but also his rebranding through an almost 13-year career in consulting. And 13 years in consulting is just not something that's easy to give up, especially when he was on the position he was at, where he was on partner track. He had a very lucrative career, but he decided to take a leap of entrepreneurship whilst having a wife and 2 kids, which people say, it's the time when you can't do that, but he's done it. And so we talk about the early years of starting Focus.Inspired, what it's like now, 3 years later, with all the learnings he experienced as an operator of his own business. And so before we go into Luki's conversation, quick reminder to support the podcast by rating it with a 5-star review on iTunes, as well as leaving a positive review on how the podcast may have helped you. This is just a great way for the podcast to reach a wider audience, to help other people that may also be in need of more perspective and inspiration in their day. So back to the conversation, and I hope you gain as much out of this conversation as I did. And so without further ado, here is my chat with Luki Danukarjanto. Hello everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Today on the podcast with me is Luki Danukarjanto. Hey Luki, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so for our audience members, would you care to explain what your company Focus.Inspired does, and also what your position as the Chief Career Catalyst is about?
So Focus.Inspired is a company that looks to help people who are stuck, mainly millennials, the ones who have no idea what they want to do with their careers, right? Or the ones that know where they want to go and don't know how to get there. So oftentimes folks are on that conveyor belt of life where you need to become a doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer, and sometimes you do that just to make mom and dad happy. And what we try to do is as a career catalyst, initiate the reactions that wouldn't have otherwise happened, right? So it's a bit of a made-up title because originally I was a career coach, but career coaching has a bit of a stigma out there where most people think that if you have a career coach, well, either you're a senior executive trying to make SVP to CEO or something like that, or there's something wrong, right? There's you're helped by the government or some other entity and institution and need some further help. But for me, I'm trying to change the conversation that, well, every high-performing person in sports or whatever, they have a coach, right? And I don't talk to people, and most people don't grow up wanting to be mediocre, right? So I say, well, you want to be high-performing, you want to achieve all the things that you want to do, yet you don't have a coach. So I want to turn the conversation more into, well, why don't you have a coach? Why don't you have a career catalyst? And the other 2 names that I give myself are a DJ for personal development, in that most of the stuff that I say, it's not new. It's been said for years. There's books on it. There's all sorts of videos out there. I just kind of remix it and add my own spin, my own flavor to kind of make it in a form that resonates more with you. So you don't like hip-hop, you don't like country, but you like, I don't know, EDM type music. Okay, well, here's something for you. You don't like Tony Robbins, you don't like Gary Vaynerchuk, you don't like this. Well, here's Oprah, or whatever it is that resonates more with you. And the third title I give myself is a personal trainer for careers. In that most people actually know what they want to do, they just don't do it. Just like going to the gym, if you want a six-pack, you do some crunches, you do some sit-ups, but most people don't. But I'll say, hey Daniel, let's go into the gym, let's do 1 crunch, okay, let's do 2 tomorrow and 3, and then eventually, that looks pretty good, and doing all that stuff. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to a short question, but essentially what we're trying to do is change the conversation, help people be unlocked, give people the tools and the techniques in order to get to where they want to be, and hopefully provide them with all the amazing resources that are already out there. And one of our aspirations is also to elevate education, which is unfortunately, from my perspective, the post-secondary system isn't actually doing what it was designed perfectly for what it was intended to do 150 years ago, but hasn't really evolved since then. And there are too many people that I talk to where they get a degree and they graduate and like, where's my job, right? And it's no longer enough to have a degree in order to get that great job. And it's even with stuff like co-op out there, it's helping, but how many co-op spots are there for how many students? And changing the conversation to really focus on exploring and discovering yourself through that kind of post-secondary period and getting to like different places in your life, right? And you don't have to necessarily follow the traditional path, especially in 2018. Maybe 20 years ago, 50 years ago, that was a good path. But nowadays, like with the internet, with all these other things, there's so many different options out there. So hopefully that answers the question.
No, definitely. And I think you bring up a lot of phenomenal points. I think like even starting with the coaching part, it's just, it seems to be an older belief of, if you only get help if you really need it. And like getting help is seen as a sign of weakness instead of a sign that you actually have the maturity to want to get better. And like, I remember even just talking to like my parents about, I think I'm gonna want to get a therapist just because I want to actually have my mental side be even clearer and even stronger. And it takes time for them to like understand, there's nothing wrong with you, but you want a therapist, or like, is there something wrong and that's why you want a therapist? And it's more, no, I just want to get better at even my mental state, so I might actually want to go talk to someone about things. Yeah. And I think that kind of stuff requires a change in mindset as well, to really start as a society embracing that culture. And like you said, like athletes all embrace it, and I think a lot of people who are not fully aware of like actually seeing those things, I think in relation to other parts of life, can kind of be like blindsided by that.
Yeah, and a lot of research points to that. If you actually look at top performing athletes, the physicality and physical ability of a lot of athletes, they're pretty much the same across the board when you get to the top levels. And it's really the mindset that has someone set apart, where the typical like Kobe Bryant and LeBron, they're on the court practicing all the time, right? But the physicality, like everyone's probably able to bench the same amount of pounds and run in the same amount of time. That's about the same. So if you think about and translate that to regular day life, well, everybody's physicality in terms of graduating with the same degree is basically the same. And everyone gets that, the bachelor's of whatever, the master's of whatever. And, how are you different than the rest of the folks? Well, oftentimes it comes down to mindset. Like, are you training? Do you want it more? Are you volunteering? Are you going out looking for internships? Are you starting podcasts on the side? Are you doing whatever it is that is really you? Or are you just hoping that you make the team, right? That sort of thing.
Yeah. I think even on like the part of like post-secondary education, yesterday I saw an article pop up on my feed on social media where Harvard released their MBA graduates salary numbers, and the article was going on about how this is practically the most important report and figure for all the MBA programs, and it just got me to think about, so if that's your measure, if the measure is just how much your MBAs are getting paid upon graduation, then do you really care about what they're actually getting inside, like the relationships they might be making, or what they could potentially be learning? Is it just purely about make sure this kid gets the best job, make sure it gets into the job that's going to pay the most, so we can say, oh, we've seen an increase of 6% in the median salary for our graduates, and we've had X many get big bonuses, and using money as like the sole metric of, this is a good school.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what I aspire to do at some point is to actually open up my own school, my own educational institute, focused on soft skills, right? So traditional schools, they do an okay job at teaching you the hard skills, but what about things like how to build relationships, emotional intelligence, effective communication, time management, right? Imagine you took a course in that in grade 12, in grade 9, in grade 6. I don't even know if you can actually teach that at that young of an age, but I think a lot of those concepts you can pick up and start learning those behaviors, even learning how to learn, right? Things like memory and techniques like that. So there are all sorts of resources out there where, like, the Greeks used to have all these memory techniques before the written word was around, and everybody had, like, knowledge was power back then. And these memory techniques have been around, and there are world championships based on that. But they don't teach that in school, even though all learning is based on memory. Well, why wouldn't you want to help the students memorize that and go through the process and learn it? And sometimes they're very simple techniques that are accessible, and incubating that at such a young age would definitely reap huge rewards further on. So, I mean, I'll go on about this sort of stuff, but
I think that's actually like a great pursuit to have. I think one of the people that come to mind as you like talk about that is like Seth Godin created his alt MBA because of a frustration born out of like he felt the post-secondary education was failing a lot of people. And I actually had a colleague who actually took the alt MBA. Cool. And she did it while she was in consulting, and it was very effective in practically helping her make the decision to finally quit her job after 10 years at the firm and actually choose herself and do what she actually wanted to do, and actually start exploring more of what she wanted to do. And so I think there definitely is a space and value for these kind of schools to actually come up and actually help people go through radical self-inquiry and develop like the soft skills, like you said.
I mean, one of the post that I wrote on LinkedIn is something like, what if education were like this? And it was like a scenario base where I talk about someone who the first year they basically get all the soft skills training, right, and figure out, and they decide to, for whatever reason, pick the traditional accounting path, right, and they go through the soft skills training, and instead of paying a university whatever, $40,000, $80,000, $100,000 to sit in a class in front of a professor, learning about concepts, they pay to sit beside an accountant for the next 4 months, 4 years, or whatever. And how much more would that person learn with those soft skills, with the learning how to learn, with dealing with people, and just even being a fly on the wall in some of the meetings that they have, in doing the work day to day, and building the infrastructure around that, because obviously that's going to take the time from the actual accountant. Why couldn't that be a model where people get that true experiential learning, and that person will either find, wow, I love accounting, let me keep doing it, or, well, actually accounting, I thought was narrow, but it's this huge thing where you have like audit, you have tax, you have all these different things, and you can subdivide, or you realize, well, I actually don't like accounting, but I like this consulting thing, I like this whatever it is, and open their eyes, because a lot of young folks are just, well, the traditional mom and dad want me to do whatever it is, and they don't take the time to explore, as you mentioned. I think that's a very important part, and that radical self-inquiry, or at least some sort of self-reflection exercise, is important, right? Because otherwise you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, other than actually doing the things that you want to do. And oftentimes if you figure out the things that you do want to do, you'll just be better at it, right? And you won't be kind of the mediocre accountant, you'll be the world's greatest chef, or whatever it is. But if you've never tried cooking, well, it's hard to get to that path, right?
Right, yeah, and like it, if we were to, I think you should talk about this in your book as well. But if we think about life as a journey, and practically any journey, there's a destination. And so if we had, let's say, a north star to go towards, how will you know what even your north star is if you don't really know who you are and what you really want to do? Obviously, you'll never have certainty over what you want to do, but at least at the current present moment, you have an idea of this is who I am, at least at this current moment, and this is where I think I want to go, and at least that'll give you some kind of North Star. And from there, then you can decide, okay, how do I want to get there, and which path would really fit with who I am.
Yeah. I actually did a YouTube post recently about a similar topic, where a lot of folks are fussed about like the North Star concept, like where they're going and the direction. But my question to them is typically, well, sure, that's your North Star and you'll inevitably be blown east or west or whatever. But the question I usually have is, well, are you the one steering the ship? Right? Because oftentimes, well, that is your North Star, but it's not really yours. It's mom and dad's North Star for you. It's your families or your cultures or whatever is North Star for you. But if you actually think about, is that my North Star? Am I the one choosing this direction? And focusing on that and seeing how you can get to the point where it's actually me. It's not the people around me. Then that starts a different sort of journey, which I think is very important for people to undertake. And they might choose, well, yeah, this is perfect. I should go there. And there are spectrums where some people should be working. They know what they want to do. They want to be that doctor, lawyer, accountant. They'll do it for the next 40 years. Cool. But I think in this day and age, there are far few people who have that kind of certainty, that clarity, that do want to do that. And there's a growing number where I think there's a statistic where it's growing that you're going to have 5 jobs in 5 years, that sort of thing, right? And the new trend with the gig economy is that you're not going to have that. You're going to have 5 jobs at the same time and just working for different employers. So there's people in different spectrums of all that, and really opening their eyes to, well, that's an option. Because a lot of people, well, entrepreneurship is cool right now. It's great and it's awesome because it is, but like a lot of folks say, there's a projected bust at some point, right? And money's going to be harder to come by, life's going to be harder to come by, and it's going to weed out the folks who aren't really supposed to be entrepreneurs, right? I don't even think I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur. I have entrepreneurial tendencies, and I'm only really doing it because otherwise I don't know who else is going to be building this sort of thing. So I think I found a bit more of a purpose to that. But at the same time, like there are other folks who are just jumping on the bandwagon because it's cool. Like just like investment banking was cool, like in the 90s or whatever, and still is, right? And every kind of industry has its ups and downs, right?
Yeah, I think one of my previous guests, so he went to a Harvard MBA as well, and he was telling me that, yeah, man, like you look at the statistics, MBA grads are practically the predictor of busts, because the year where all the MBA grads go to a certain field, that's the year when it all go bust. Like it's right. Like how everybody went to finance in 2006, right. 2007, and everybody went into tech in 1999, 1998, and then it all just came down. And I think I'm definitely seeing that even in the kind of startup ecosystem here in Toronto, where I'm talking to a lot of my accounting friends, and these are people that truly just don't really want to take risks in any form, and they are actually now changing the mindset of, you know what, I think I can do it. Like everyone's doing it. It seems safe now,
right.
And then they are slowly moving in. And I don't think we're in the massive euphoria yet, but I'm seeing these tendencies of all these people who tend to be very risk averse making these jumps into things that are actually quite risky. For their, I think, tendencies. So that is an interesting, I think, plight that I'm seeing at the moment.
Well, I challenge that a little bit in terms of like that risk, right? It's always perceived risk, because being an entrepreneur, what the opportunity is that it's all for you. You have the choice day to day whether you're making money or not, right? Working for a company, working for a big bank, you could be downsized at any moment with any restructuring or whatever. So it's an illusion of safety. But it is one that has to be understood and potentially mitigated. The life of an entrepreneur is hard because you are the best boss and the worst boss at the same time, right? So having to go out there and build business and find clients and do the work or whatever it is, and doing it on a consistent basis is much more difficult than getting a consistent paycheck every 2 weeks. And some people should do that. Some people shouldn't. And to me, entrepreneurship is like any career path, and it could be points in time. When you're young, go start a business or whatever, but use that as a stepping stone to become like a director, senior manager, VP, or whatever at a company, and maybe start something else, and then whatever. So it's just yet another option that hopefully it's notoriety or its cool factor right now, where everyone wants to be a founder of this and that. Hopefully that doesn't take too many people down. And one of the challenges I find is a lot of it is a mindset thing too, right? Because folks are looking for that $1 million, $1 billion idea and exit, whereas, I mean, to put it in context, I actually did a entrepreneurial, demystifying entrepreneurship session on Monday with Centennial, and what we went through is kind of figuring out the orders of magnitude and scale. Like, humans aren't really good at understanding like the difference between like million and billion and stuff like that. So the concept I went through is, well, 365 is a year, that many days in a year. Well, if you turn that into seconds, how many minutes is that? Well, people say, well, about 6 minutes. Okay, could you wait 6 minutes? Sure, most people could do that. Well, if you take 1 million seconds and convert that, how many seconds is that? And people are guessing, and it's about 11 days. So 6 minutes versus 11 days to get to that million. Now, if you convert 1 billion to seconds, how many is that? Well, someone said 1,011 days. It's like, okay, yes, but what is that? That's about 32 years. So people don't understand what 1 million versus 1 billion is. They're just throwing their hat in and hoping to go into that direction.
Yeah, so it's a couple digits, right? That's what
it's
they're thinking.
It's a couple digits. It's 3 zeros, right?
Yeah.
It's actually nothing.
Yeah.
So they think it's achievable. But they call them unicorns for a reason, because there aren't very many of them around. So it's one where too many people are trying to do that based on like social media or whatever. That's the sexy or the cool thing to do. And hopefully it doesn't bring too many people down, because they're awesome careers where, well, why become an accountant and make $80,000 versus being a YouTuber and making $80,000, or being a chef or being whatever. There's all these options right now where you could be really good at your craft, whatever it is. You got to be good. Like, you can't be a mediocre chef and do that well. But there are all these options out there.
Right. Yeah. It's more about being the best version of you that you could potentially be.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Totally. And I think personally, one of the missions I have for this podcast is also to alleviate, as you said, the kind of pomp and circumstance that media paints for entrepreneurship. Like the few guests I've had who are entrepreneurs, we talk about it's shitty not being able to pay yourself at the first few years, or like, it's not all this glamour and all that. Like, there's a lot of grunt work. Like, you're doing all the janitorial stuff yourself. Like, you're doing deliveries yourself. Like, it's, you're up until like 1 a.m. every day. Like, but you're doing it because you love it, not because you have to do it. It's very different. And we talked about how you talked about in your video of how some people, who's steering the ship, your mom, your culture. You're Indonesian, based on your last name. Mm-hmm. Did you grow up in Indonesia?
I moved from there when I was 3, so I basically grew up in Canada. So I have a bit of that heritage, and I love Indonesian food, and I always go home, and my mom's the best cook that way, and she spoils me. But I mean, I identify myself as Canadian, right? But if people will ask me where I'm from, I'll say Indonesia. But outside the country, outside of Canada, I'll always say Canada, right? And then that's pretty typical for most folks. But
and so then, given kind of did you have a kind of like an immigrant kind of family household mindset where people stereotypically talk about how when you're first generation from an immigrant family, then you have this pressure to like perform and do all these jobs, etc. Did you have that growing up?
A little bit of that. A lot of it was probably more self-imposed than what my parents think about. But my name Luki was originally Luke for Saint Luke, who's the patron saint of doctors. Right, so that was kind of the initial aspiration for me. I failed that miserably, but and there was always my dad was an engineer. He worked for IBM, so a lot of it as well. Why not follow in your dad's footsteps? And I did a computer science degree, kind of in pursuit of that. And when I was growing up, the circle of friends that I had, there was like science and technology. That was the kind of top level thing, and business was actually, you were a second class person if you ended up, or you weren't doing so well if you ended up going to business. So that was kind of our demographic, whether it was the time or just the group of friends that we hung out. So there was that pressure. When I was growing up, I actually was identified as a gifted student, right? So I went to the special school in like grade 4 or whatever, and that was probably, well, the worst and the best thing that happened in that. It made me a little bit more kind of arrogant than I used to be, and the book by Carol Dweck about mindset and growth mindset, I was super fixed mindset where because I was smart, I didn't have to study. Right, so and I got through elementary school and most of high school because I was supposedly smart, but well, because I'm smart, I don't have to study, and you can only do that for so long where you don't open the book and do well, right? So I started struggling in like grade 11, 12, OIC when I was growing up. So there was always that pressure to perform because like grades were important. To get to the good school was very important. And well, I wasn't good enough because I wasn't getting the A's when I got my like first B. It's like, what the hell happened? And then first year, I almost failed out of my first year, out of my first year program, because again, when you're not opening up books and not trying to consume the information, it gets pretty tough. And then for whatever reason, and I wish I had read the book around that time. But I decided to, you know what, after getting a letter saying that you might be dismissed from the program and be pulled out type of thing, that was kind of the wake-up call to say, okay, you know what, I actually should try and I actually should open. And then, yeah, I saw a steady increase in my marks. But there was always that pressure to perform. And I was trying to decompose on whether or not a lot of it was self-imposed or if it was from the parents. So it was a bit of both. And yeah, it's just culture. Everyone's trying to compete with each other. Like I was supposed to go to Waterloo for computer science because it was kind of the top school. I didn't get in, so I had to go to kind of the next one and make the most of it. I did UT Scarborough because it had a co-op program, so at least I had the foresight to try to get some work experience on that side. But yeah, it was definitely, you had to perform, you had to do well. You couldn't show your vulnerability of I was struggling and I can't do this, especially since I had this label of gifted and smart and whatever. But I've since been able to kind of switch to that growth mindset and realize that, you know what, if I may be smart, but you actually have to work for it too. And doing that work smart and working hard is definitely something that was important. So yeah, there was a bit of that pressure, actually, probably a lot of that pressure. One of the jokes that we had is you come home with like a 92% and it's like, well, where's the other 8 type of thing, right? But they never necessarily said that in those specific words, but I always felt that sort of pressure, right? So yeah.
And so you got to like a gifted school at 4 and
age 4, no, grade 4, no, not age 4. So,
okay,
so the way that it works here is you take this test in grade 3, I think.
Okay.
And you put this. You have to do multiple levels. And my sister was identified that way, so there was aspirations that I got identified as well. So once a week we would go to the special school where they do like more activities and puzzles and brain teasers and stuff like that, which I thought was great. But most people don't want to be identified as different, right? Whether it's good or bad. So I had to be carted off, me and this one other girl, but she wanted to be like the normal people, so she never went, right? So she stayed with kind of the regular folks. I decided for whatever reason to do that, and yeah, so it continued on until high school, and there was again a special set of things that you had to do, and I was always like the bottom of that class, which was not good. At least I was up there, but I was definitely struggling, right? Because all my friends who were smart, they were actually studying, they were actually doing what they were supposed to do, right? So it was a bit challenging. It's kind of, yeah, good job, Luki, like first world problems type of thing. But I mean, it's the reality where unfortunately there is that perception or that pressure that is put upon folks. Yeah.
What kind of dream occupation or like career did you have when you were like 7?
That was 7.
Yeah.
It was probably the typical like astronaut, police officer type of thing. But if I kind of think back, I actually at one point wanted to be an architect, right? I think in grade 8, I drew my own house. Because it had like a hidden pathway and like a slide that went down, like one of those. I think I read a book where it was one of those like mansions where they did that. So I actually did an architectural drawing of that, and I tried to do it in the schematic and stuff. And then I took a look at kind of that career path, like, wow, it looks super hard and ridiculous, and how many architects really are there other than building like small houses? Like, how many people designed this building? Well, one, right? So, but how many other people are any sorts of things? Like, and for me, like, computer science was the big thing there, because the dot-com bubble was starting, which is why it kind of led me to that path. But when I was when I was 6, I was looking to be an architect.
Wow, that's funny, because I thought about being an architect for a very long time too when I was young. I think around similar ages to grade 7, 8, I had a project of designing a house, and I was the only one that actually made a cylinder house.
Okay.
And no,
I just drew it. I never actually made it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, so I didn't make it, but like we had to like do all these blueprints and actually calculate how, you know, the house would be formed inside, like the interior design and everything. And then I kind of got hooked, and I started taking classes at an arts university, like to build up a portfolio to apply to architecture school. And so I did everything, like physics, chemistry, like all the stuff to get into architecture has the same requirements as engineering. So I did all the stuff. And then close to the end of it, what I considered my portfolio just was not what I thought it should be. Like, I compared it to my other friends who were good at art, or other kids in the architecture program, or like the class I was going to, and I was like, man, this is not really my forte. And I ended up not taking that path altogether. But it's funny that you mentioned architecture. It makes me reminisce back to my time.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think back whether I made the right decision, and I believe I did, but at the same time, I like to do some creative work once in a while, like draw and this and that, but never as good as other people, right? So.
Yeah. Well, your current endeavor is creative in its own different way, right?
Different way, yeah. Definitely.
And so after computer science, you went to join Hewlett-Packard as a consultant?
I was actually, that was a co-op term, so I did that for 4 months. It was actually an interesting one where they gave me a lot of free reign. This was in, 2000, right? So they had this thing called Cool Town, right? So it's basically a showcase of all of HP's new innovative technology. So this is when like 802.11a, the wireless standard, just got ratified. Like Bluetooth was a new thing, and like handhelds were like this massive endeavor, right? So we had a 3/4 mock-up of a Ford Mustang in the showcase, with basically a 40-inch plasma screen, and this is when plasma screens cost like $40,000. So it was there, and we basically had a setup where someone would take their handheld and basically put it in the phone, and it would kind of sync to the device. And this is like in 2000, right? So this is like almost 20 years ago. They were trying to profile this technology, and then it would say, oh, you like Japanese food, and as you're GPS navigating around, okay, you might want to stop off for lunch type of thing, and then your car ends up having like some problem, and so it signals the garage that there's one down the street, and they accept your insurance and stuff like that, and it radios for like a rental car to kind of meet you there. So you go to the garage, and while you're at the garage, there's this jukebox with, if folks even know what that is, but it's kind of like a portable music player, and you could pay for the jukebox with your handheld, and they had like a pop machine, a vending machine, and you could pay for that in that, and they would have these infrared beacons where you could get information on like the artwork that's all around there, and all within your handheld, and it was like really cool, and they would print all that sort of stuff. So they were way ahead of their time, but at the same time, a lot of it was smoke and mirrors, because none of the infrastructure existed for any of this sort of stuff. So we'd have to kind of force fit. When I click this button, then it activates this pressure switch, which makes the Coke fall down from the machine, right? But it made for a good kind of like media day. So I wasn't given like a $500,000 budget to kind of put that in place, which I thought was super cool. And my title was a technical consultant, so that was my first kind of introduction into consulting, even though that wasn't really consulting. But it kind of turned me on to that, and it was an awesome experience. I think I was like way over my head in terms of being able to do that, but I guess I was naive enough to say that I can do that. I can figure it out, and because a lot of this technology it's super new, right? The infrared technology, again, Bluetooth, like nobody even knew what Bluetooth was. Like, how do you automatically pair? Like, what is this thing? I don't. It doesn't even make sense. So yeah, that was the one co-op term at Hewlett Packard, which I think was the planting of the seed of what consulting is. So that's why when I ended up joining Deloitte, well, okay, I'm familiar with that term, even though it was totally different than what I did there. But yeah.
Right. Okay. So, now we go into the next phase where now you're at Deloitte and you've had close to like a 13-year career at Deloitte in the technology consulting practice.
Yeah.
And so when you first got into the job, were you then thinking, all right, I'm going to make another cool town as part of Deloitte?
No, I was totally... So when I graduated, the dot-com bubble burst, right? So folks in tech, it was really hard to get a job. Actually, when I graduated, I actually was thinking that I would be a technical support person. So previously, I worked at the federal government doing tech support. I was doing that at TD Bank for co-op terms and over the summer and stuff. And I like dealing with people and helping them with their problems. So I thought, hey, why not be like a tech support person? That was my dream job. And I actually had a few opportunities that because I had co-op, I had a couple of job offers and pretty low paying ones. But for that time, the fact that you got a job or an offer was awesome. And then a friend's brother, they said, hey, we're looking for a developer. So I'm like, okay, I could try to do that. I've never really done a job as a developer before. So he helped me get an interview, and I got the job. And the company just happened to be with Deloitte. I had no idea. I was talking to some business folks. Yeah, they do some accounting stuff. So I just kind of stumbled into that. And it was great. There was the decision between different firms, different companies. There was a smaller firm that was doing that, network infrastructure storage or something like that. And I just felt that Deloitte would have more growth opportunities. So I picked that, and a few months in, I realized I don't really like coding for whatever reason, because I never really did it. It's not that I hated it, but then I found there's actually a team on the other side of the floor that they were having lots of fun, right? They were always collegial, and it was seemed like good times. So I got friendly with them and asked them, well, what do you guys do? And they did this thing called sourcing and procurement. I have no idea what the heck that stuff is. But I learned a little bit, and then I asked them, well, do you need any help? And they said, yeah, we need a technical lead, right? Okay, and I thought, well, what does a technical lead do? Well, they just manage a bunch of developers, right? So I said, I can manage a team of me. So I ended up taking that role, and this is with a technology that I've only been using and learning for 2 months, but now I'm leading a team of 7 people in order to do that, right? So I was on the plane reviewing manuals and preparing for workshops that for the next day. We'd run the workshop, and then overnight I'd have to prepare for the next one, because I'm just figuring out, I'm just a couple steps ahead of the client, because this is technology where it's relatively new for the company itself, and so there weren't very many people who knew how to do it. But again, maybe just being naive that wow, this is cool, I'm learning, I'm getting paid to learn, and all that sort of stuff. I'm working like crazy, but I'm growing so much. So yeah, and I did that, and I basically took on pretty much every role from a tech lead, and I did more functional stuff. So I would, as a technical lead, I'd be in workshops, and they'd be drawing process diagrams and showing, well, when you go from here, you go to this step or that step. And then I said, I can do that, right? So I started leading the workshops and doing that. And from there, I did more the testing and the change management and the training, because well, if I design the system, hopefully I can test it and make sure it works. If I designed it and built it, hopefully I can train you on how to use it. And then if I've done all that, I might as well manage the project, right? And if I've managed a whole bunch of these projects, I might as well advise you in all the risks and issues on the different projects that are happening. So I kind of evolved over the 12 years, almost 13, and essentially ended up running one of the practice areas there. And I had about 25 people underneath me, $1 million accounts, and was a recognized global subject matter expert in sourcing and procurement technology. Well, that's kind of what the marketing said, but what really kind of I took away from that experience, obviously, other than all the core consulting type learnings, was I realized an interest in people and people development. So I got involved quite by accident. My senior manager at the time said, hey, someone just assigned me this campus recruiting thing, so you're going to help me do it. I'm like, okay, thanks. So, and I would be on campus doing all the info sessions, helping organize interviews and running through the process, and then going through the process of shortlisting and selecting and working with partners to see their needs and stuff like that. And I found I really liked that. It was an awesome experience, and it kept me young because I'd be with all the kids and meeting with them and learning more about their journeys and stuff like that. And yeah, so I just kept doing that and got more and more involved in people and talent development, and that's kind of what led me to my switch, where like it seems all good and rosy and all that sort of stuff. And in that role, I actually had literally the list that said yes or no to anyone that got hired across all of Canada into tech consulting, right? So I had a lot of responsibility there, and it was a great time. So and then I had what I call my quarter career crisis, which is traveled a lot as a consultant. So out of the 12 years that I was there, probably about 8 of them were on a plane. On Monday morning, go off to a client, and then Thursday fly back, sometimes Friday or sometimes over the weekend, whatever. And I was on a project specifically in Montreal, and I was FaceTiming with my wife and my son at the time. He was I think 1 or 2, and he was learning to walk and talk and roll and stuff like that. And I had a second one on the way, so I had to make a decision on what do I do, right? Because I was senior manager, next step would have been partner. There's a clear path for me to get there. I was being groomed into that role, or family, because I didn't think I could do both at the same time. So I ended up picking family, and then I had to figure out, well, what did I want to actually do when I grew up, so to speak. And after a lot of soul searching, self-reflecting, and speaking to mentors, like coaching came up, right? Because doing the multi-million-dollar transformations with like a senior VP or CEO or whatever, it's kind of like meh, right? I've done that a bunch of times, but when a new hire came on board and they were ready to start and they wanted to have coffee with me, I got excited, right? And so there was something to kind of exploring your interest in that. And I found there was a need, because there's so many folks out there who I would go to an info session and ask them, well, why do you want to be a consultant? Their chest puffs up and say, well, I want to be a consultant because of blah, blah, blah. I've done this. And then I ask, no, hold on. Why do you really want to be a consultant? And they'll kind of soften up and say, well, because I couldn't be a doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer, and my brother was one, or my dad was one, or my uncle was one. And then, well, what do you really want to be? And they would say something like, you know what? I love cooking. I love art. I love this and that. And, well, why don't you pursue that? It's like, well, I can. Why not? And so that kind of triggered me to say, okay, people don't really have the understanding of options, right? Sure, there are risks, but sometimes, especially when you're young, go take those risks, right? Especially in this day and age. And it's the appropriate conversations with parents or family or whatever to say, hey, this stuff is it's going to help me in my long run, because I'm going to actually be doing stuff that fulfills me, that I love doing, and I'll throw myself into it, versus something that I'm only doing it for the sake of it, right? So it's kind of a long-winded answer. So hopefully that kind of goes through my journey through Deloitte, and actually a little bit through the transition part of going from there into my entrepreneurial journey, so to speak.
Yeah, no, and I think the continuous theme that I'm constantly seeing is just, you talked about how when you were deciding to leave, you asked yourself and you thought about, what really excites me, and it was like those times of, oh, I have a coffee with this new hire, like I'm excited, and I can totally understand what you're talking about, just because I have those similar sparks too, and like I know, like, oh, today I'm meeting this person that I'm supposed to help. That's amazing. Right. But even before that, like even as a developer, you see what the guys, the sourcing and procurement team are doing, and you go, that looks interesting. I think I want to do that. Yeah. And just putting your hand up and raising your hand, and from the progression you've had, it's just you've constantly been raising your hand to do what it would seem to be like naturally curious to you. Like, was that? Did you read the book by Carol Dweck by then? Like, nope. To constantly think about? I read that like
last year.
Oh, okay.
So it's much later on. So I guess I was always a curious person, and I think part of it is just being naive too, where I didn't think, oh, well, sure, I'll try it. Why not? And it was one where because I did do it, I picked it up, and I saw success from it, and I realized that I could do it. And Deloitte's a great company, has a lot of support and infrastructure around, and people. I had a lot of good mentors throughout the whole process that kind of helped me through that, right? And again, supportive parents. So as much as I talk about like the pressures around, like they were great. A lot of it is probably more self-imposed than what they put on. But it is one where, I guess I was always a curious person. I never thought of myself as that, because I was more introverted. Again, the typical computer scientist type of thing. And but sure, why not? Like if someone said, "Oh, you want to try this?" Sure, why not? You want to try this? Sure, why not? You want to try this? Sure, why not? And then the most challenging part in the whole process was trying to figure out like how to say no, because oftentimes you get overloaded with too many things and you want to try too many things and you get kind of that FOMO, the fear of missing out type factor. And so you don't want to say no, but at the same time, by taking on more stuff, and you get a little overloaded and overwhelmed. So somehow I managed to balance myself in that. And again, the whole reason for writing the book was to kind of outline, well, this is the stuff that I learned the hard way, right? And if someone had told me this, hopefully I would have listened, because sometimes it takes a while for it to incubate and grow within your own mindset. But yeah, this is hopefully stuff that this is definitely the stuff that I wish I knew earlier, that I think would have helped me be even more successful in my career path, right?
Mm. And you also mentioned how you became marketed as a subject matter expert in what you did. And did you feel that as that brand became part of it kind of pigeonholed you into a specific niche that might have hurt your chances of being more curious in other areas? Like it seems kind of like how you get branded like as a gifted child, so there's not pressure to focus on procurement, like sourcing and procurement, and being really good at that.
Yeah, for me, I actually went through like a journey of figuring out like what is my brand, what is that? Because that is definitely a question that's asked. So typically, when you're a consultant of something, you're an expert in something. That doesn't mean you can't do other things, but you are the industry leading person in a particular area, right? So a lot of times I thought I had identified myself as the sourcing and procurement, the technology person, someone who can just pick up any technology and understand the business process and do that. I had the other brand of the recruiting guy, right? The campus recruiting guy. So those are kind of the two brands that I had there. And there was a specific meeting that we had. So we're senior managers. Had a meeting with one of the very senior partners, and he was talking about his brand. So this is a partner where he's done a lot of things, right? He like built the Hong Kong practice. He did like manufacturing lead. He headed all of technology, all of Canada, and now is like an Uber global partner. And he's retiring now. But anyways, at that time, someone asked the question, well, how many brands have you had? And he said something that really stuck with me. He's like, I've only had one. I'm like, huh? Okay, please explain. And he said, well, it took me a while to figure it out, but the brand that I had throughout the whole process was leadership, right? I was always leading that. So whatever my business card said, I was always leading people and inspiring people and creating a vision and all that sort of stuff. Like, okay, which caused me to say, well, actually, my brand isn't sourcing and procurement. It's not recruiting. It's not whatever. It's mentorship. Like, I'm a good consultant because I mentor my clients. I provide them guidance and advice in order to how to do things better. I am good at recruiting and all that sort of stuff and people development because I mentor and coach that. So that was kind of the aha moment where, okay, maybe I can turn this into a full-time thing. And like the challenge was very, very challenging, and obviously, being a little bit, as we talked about, that risk averse, right? So, and risk is always in context, so trying to mitigate that, and what I did was essentially I had two things that really sparked me in order to go on the journey. Is one, I thought to myself, I will never have any more energy than I do now, right? Getting older, 2 kids and all that. There's more pains in places where I never thought I had muscles, that sort of thing. And the second thing was I will never have any less responsibility than I do now, right? So I've always been entrepreneurial, had tendencies. I wanted to open up my own restaurant and like a tutoring school and all that sort of stuff. But I never enacted on that. So based on those things, I realized, okay, if I'm going to do this, I do want to do it. When would I do it? And when I'm like 65, when the kids are out of the house or whatever. And I thought to myself, okay, on those things, well, if I did this, what might happen? So I go off and start this entrepreneurial thing, and it's a colossal failure. I could probably go back and get my old job back. Maybe not the same path or trajectory, but they'd probably take me back. Or one of the clients that I build good relationships with, I could probably do that. Or, I mean, I could probably work at some quick serve restaurant at a Starbucks or whatever. I could do that. And like before I end up on the street, I could like move in with my parents, my in-laws, or friends, or whatever, before any of that stuff happened. So it was actually a very risk mitigated approach, and I ended up taking a contract. So there was a good opportunity at a bank. Banks, you tend to have better hours, right? And and as a contractor, you get paid a little bit better based on like tax and stuff like that. So I used that as kind of my seed funding, and I did that for about a year, from 9 to 5 doing that, and then from 5 to 12, minus the time spent with the kids and trying to be home for dinner and all that sort of stuff, figuring out, well, how can I reach out and build like a coaching practice around that. And after a year, I decided to, what if I did this full time, right? And that was a very painful experience because, again, without that consistent income, there's a lot of whole mindset stuff that needs to happen and transition to. But now it's kind of growing and it's building, and now I have a ton of opportunities. I have to figure out what to say yes to and what to say no to is the trajectory. And I have a goal to make Toronto the mentorship capital of the world, which is my new marketing branding. And it's to share that swike, the stuff I wish I knew earlier, because that's what a mentor does. When I was your age, this is what I did, and you can choose to do it or not. But I encourage everyone to have 5-10 mentors, or however many they can handle, but more importantly, to have 5-10 mentees, and share that wisdom that you've gathered, where that person in 4th year, in grade 12, in grade 8, would greatly benefit from the experiences that you've had, because they are you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 10 years from now, whatever it is. They are you, and because you can't necessarily Google it or find that information, having these conversations, and I applaud you for like recording these, because someone will benefit from the conversation. Is it one person? For sure. Is it 10 people? Maybe. Is it 100? Is it 100,000? Who knows? But there'll be someone who'll be like, I will go down that path because I got inspired by that, or I won't go down that path because I got inspired by that. So, I think all this stuff is how I decided to kind of switch over and kind of go through that entrepreneurial journey.
No, I think just your approach. I think there's, before I go into your approach, I think one thing that immediately popped into my mind when you're telling me about the value of even having mentees is I don't remember. It's another popular saying, but I don't remember who said it. But it goes on the lines of, you want to have 5 people much older than you, 5 people your age, and 5 people who are much younger than you.
Okay.
And that should be your mastermind group, where you have peers that always challenge you, but you also have mentors who will guide you, but you also have mentees that you will teach, and those 3 will continuously help you learn constantly in different ways and formats. And right. I think that's something that is constantly overlooked, the value of actually having mentees, and because when you teach, you also learn so much from people who have much younger and different perspectives from you, because even 5 years younger than you would be sometimes in like a completely different generation, given how fast things are changing in our world.
And I think that age is a bit of a proxy, right? Where sometimes it's not age, because there's some young folks that have accomplished way more than I have, and I treat them as mentors. And people actually ask me, like, how many mentors do you have? And I'm like, thousands or hundreds and thousands, because I basically everybody who I meet is a mentor in one shape or form. Like, I have something to learn from you, and I've learned a ton from you already, but what is it that I have to learn from you? And my goal is to figure out what that is. So and for some people it's what not to do because you know there's those people in your life. But oftentimes, by taking that mindset, like, I'm a huge advocate of soft skills and building relationships, and like, I was obviously the total opposite of that before, from a computer science perspective. But now understanding that at the end of the day, like, it's about people, right? And the relationships you build, those are going to be impactful for you in order to be more successful in your career path, right?
And it seems that, I was surprised when you told me about how you were arrogant when you were younger because you were in like a gifted program, because from our conversations it's very apparent that you have a lot of humility in how you speak and how you want to learn from a lot of people. Like, you can't be curious if you're not humble, I think. And I think maybe it was that experience that actually helped. It was so impactful that it just pushed you completely to the other end. But I think another thing that really got me really excited was just your method of risk mitigation. It's a very stoic way of looking at what's the worst that can happen, and when you actually think about what's the worst you could happen, you actually had pretty good margin of safety to
Sure.
make the decision that you did. And I think it was something that I was very curious about was that where, you have kids, you have a family, and a lot of, I think, people who would be in similar situations as you, who've established themselves in a big firm, who are on the partner track, would have this huge feeling of that sunk cost fallacy of, man, how can I throw all this away? And thinking that it is like they're throwing something away. And also just immediately saying, I can't take that risk. I have kids, I have a family, I have a mortgage, I can't do that. And just immediately shut the door on that. But for you, making that decision, you went through your personal risk mitigation process. But what was it like actually going through that decision process with your family, your friends, like your colleagues? How did they all react to?
Yeah, so there were a lot of varying and different reactions. So it was obviously a lot of discussion with my wife. So there's a long time coming before I actually made the decision, and she knows that I was a bit of a flip-flopper. We're like, oh, okay, are you deciding to stay or are you deciding to go today, right? What about today? And then because I would change my mind because it was a hard decision. Because to your point, being somewhere for over a decade, that's a huge investment, and I had huge opportunities ahead of me, right? But there was kind of this nagging feeling, and I don't know exactly when it came to me, but it's kind of summed up, I think it's a Jim Rohn quote where he says that the pain of doing weighs ounces and the pain of regret weighs tons, right? So for me, it's like, okay, which would be worse? So going down this path and having it be a colossal failure and having to tail between my legs, crawl back and get my old job back type of thing, or being kind of 65, 95 and saying, I shoulda tried that thing. So that really stuck with me where that would probably eat me up inside, right? Because I don't have an opportunity. And because I always had those initial entrepreneurial tendencies, and then I kind of went through screw it, you know what, I'll give myself 2 years, 3 years to do it, right? And if it doesn't work, okay, let's go through. Let's do whatever I need to do. And it doesn't mean that it was easier, or there's so many. I needed to write a stuff I wish I knew earlier entrepreneurial edition because there's so many things. But a lot of it is mindset, right? Because the tactical stuff is actually relatively easy. It's the making sure that when you wake up, you actually want to do the stuff that you want to do, and because there's a whole bunch of stuff that's awesome and great, and there's a bunch of administrative stuff. I think we chatted before. I'm the CEO and the janitor, right? I got to mop the floors and do all that sort of stuff. Which I would rather want to do, and when you're in a big company, you have other people to help you with that. But when you're on your own, it's not that. So the decision was hard, and it was encouraged when I would be with folks in my kind of a goodbye party, that sort of thing, and there'll be a lot of folks who've known me through my career, and they go, Luki, WTF? I thought you were a lifer. I thought you were your on-track partner. And it's like, yeah. So what happened? And then I'd kind of go through that, and I'd say, so what are you going to do? And I would say, well, I'm going to become a career coach. And then they kind of said, oh, that actually makes sense. And so that was a little bit reassuring, where even the career path was, okay, people saw me in that light anyway. So that conversation was relatively easy, actually. My kids were too young to understand, and then it's a challenge with in-laws and my own parents, because my parents were like, cool, yeah, do what you love, and then the in-laws were like, what? He's making a lot of good money over here, and he's quitting that to do that. So it's a lot of trying to kind of keep them up to date and informed in terms of what I've been doing, because a lot of folks, they don't understand. They don't understand what this whole path is, or what the interest is. They would rather just get a job, clocking at 9, get out at 5, and then get that paycheck, and then raise family, kids, and all that sort of stuff, and do it. So it's communication, I guess, helped in that process. But at the end of the day, it was just me informing and saying, this is what I'm doing, versus asking for permission, right? Whether that was the right thing to do or not, it's just kind of how it ended up shaping out. So.
Right. I think a saying I used to say a lot to my colleagues back when I was in consulting was ask for forgiveness, not permission. And so it was more, and I'm sure I rubbed off wrong to some people, but also I got a lot of respect from other people in terms of what I ended up doing, where it was just you've already decided, you know deep down what you want to do, and it's just you just do it and see how it goes. And so how were like the first like 6 months of running, Focus?
Right. So, well, the first year I was on that contract, right? So it's actually relatively easy and smooth because I had some good money coming in on the day job, and then at night, whenever I could carve out some hours when the kids were in bed, or I could say, hey, I have this event. There's a lot of flexibility where if I got my stuff done, then people would assume I'm in meetings and that sort of thing. So the first year was actually quite good, trying to get traction. Now, the challenge for me is there's probably too many false positives in the sense that, yeah, everybody wants this coaching, because a lot of it was me trying to give the service for free just to kind of build the foundations. But when you start charging, then people are less receptive to that, and figuring out what model. At one point during that time, I created this training workshop to like unleashing your career potential, and this is like a resume, a job hunt seeking workshop. Rented out like a meeting space at a hotel, and kind of got it. We could have like 40 people there in like a lecture style thing, and I put it out there, and no one registered. Like, wow. that was not great at all. So I started giving tickets away for free, and then lowered the cost and stuff like that, right? So I didn't end up breaking even for that. It's like, okay, maybe that's not the right thing. So maybe it's not training courses, maybe it's the individual one. Maybe it's supporting like institutions like schools. Maybe it's going through businesses. So I had to come up with, well, what are the different ways, and then try to systematically go through it. And then I was seeing a bit of traction again. We're still in that first year. So I said, you know what, if I double down and basically put the full time commitment into this work, I'm sure I can see something. That first year was quite terrible, actually, in terms of, because a lot of the stuff, and a lot of it is the mindset stuff where I didn't necessarily value my own services. So I would be giving away this stuff for free. Meanwhile, that person was very readily willing to pay for it, right? Because a part of it is me trying to be very like philanthropic and helping humanity and stuff like that, but and being nice to people. Meanwhile, it's like, no, I would have paid for this. So it was kind of getting past that mindset, and there was a bit of like imposter syndrome, like not being good enough, because who am I as a coach? I didn't have any certifications, I didn't have any experience. So like, sure, I've been doing it informally for the past like decade and stuff like that, but like what does that mean? So it was that journey to kind of fix my mindset and figure, okay, where do I want to focus on? And then it was a lot of the big eyes type of thing where, oh, I could do it one-on-one, I could do it for companies, I could do workshops, I could do it for schools, I could create all these different collateral, a podcast, I could write a book, I could do whatever. And oftentimes when you do too many things and aren't focused, then I usually talk about like, it's better to have one thing done at 100% than 10 things at 10%, right? So I was a victim of that. So and then it was a bit of, well, if I'm not seeing traction, is this the right thing? And am I a failure? Am I not doing this in the right way? So I was always trying to pick myself up out of those values. Okay, no, my company is called Focus.Inspired, so you gotta get focused and pick one thing, and trying to inspire myself to do that. So I'm I guess in my third year. That middle year was pretty challenging, probably a year and a half. But now I think I've got to the point where I've built a bit of a foundation. People are starting to really know me, and I'm not having to kind of go out and biz dev and sell as much, because more of it's coming here. So I'm reaping the fruits of my labor, but it's definitely was a very, very challenging first little bit. So I encourage folks, if they do go down this path, like make sure you build a lot of buffer. Like I thought I could have this up and running in like 2 years type of thing, and I'm on year 3, and it's still picking up. But like double whatever you think it is, and hopefully that'll save you a lot of headache and anxiety later on. Right?
Yeah, you couldn't have put it any better way. Like the imposter syndrome, the feeling of, am I really the right person to be talking about this thing? Those are things that continue to plague me, like just on an everyday basis. Even just like I'll send out like every Tuesday I send out like a 2,000 word article that I would have written, and somewhere like I think like there's like a great article, like I think I've written a masterpiece essay, and like nobody will read it. And then I try not to get hung up on about it, but sometimes you just can't help it. Sometimes
Yep.
it just hits you randomly while you're just sitting down and reading, and then
Yeah.
you stop reading and you go, man, that sucked.
Yeah, especially considering you've had a bunch of success in your career too, and it's always been self-reinforcing. Like, I'm doing a good job, I'm doing a good job, but now you're in this totally new path and in this totally like different pond, and well, nobody's really noticing this, and realizing, okay, well, I'm new. Like, you're now a 1 month old or 1 year old in this kind of new journey. Okay, give yourself some credit. You have room to grow before you start walking, before you start crawling, before you're running, that sort of thing. There's room for improvement. So for me, it was like a huge kind of mindset shift. So a lot of it is the stuff that I go through is the stuff that I've guinea pigged on myself, right? I've had to try and like, oh crap, how do I get past this? And then, all right, this would make for a good article. And then walking through with a client, okay, what about trying this? Okay, this is what I did. Okay, these things didn't work for me, but oh, that worked for you. Cool. Let's see how we can do it. So now my aspiration is to kind of bring all this to the masses, right? So I actually have a goal to what I call move the middle, right? Because the top 10-20%, they're fine. They're going to be okay. They'll be good and meet their kind of CEO level, SVP, whatever. The bottom 10-20%, they have other challenges. Hopefully the government and nonprofit and stuff will take care of them. But there's this huge 60-80% that if only they were given a few options and kind of encouraged or provided some toolkits or mitigated a bit of risk and kind of moved up one notch, then how big of an impact could that be through mentorship, through menteeship, through whatever it is, in order to kind of get those ones to the top as well. And my view is that there's abundance around where like it's not that you're taking away anything from the top, you're just making the pie bigger, right? You're not taking anyone's slices. So the ones that I try to focus on are the folks who are comfortable, right? They're living their life, doing. They got a degree in accounting, got a job in accounting, and they're okay with accounting. They don't love it, but they're comfortable, and they have this nibbling thing in the back of their heads, like, I could be doing more. I could be doing something different, right? Maybe in accounting, maybe in elsewhere. And I pick on accountants just because. But whatever it is, like me being a computer scientist, right? You're doing it. Was it you? Are you the one steering? Did you steer yourself into this course, right? And so that's the aspiration. And I have a goal to become one of the new billionaires, which is to positively impact 1 billion people, right? Now, will I hit that goal? Maybe not. But if I hit 100 million or 1 million or 100,000, that's not half bad, right? So. That might as well, what's the expression, shoot for the stars because you might hit the moon type of thing. So we'll see how big of an impact. And that drives me because I get emails and notes like, wow, that's really helped. And sometimes they're people who I know and have helped, and sometimes they're people who I just met or I haven't met. And to grow that would be an interesting thing, because I think there needs to be a change in conversation. I actually feel that education will be one of the bubbles that are going to burst soon, right? Because there's more and more companies that are taking away degree requirements as a qualification in order to get a job there. I think 2 of the big 4, and I think Google and a bunch of other big players. You don't longer need a bachelor's degree in order to get there. Well, if you don't have a bachelor's, then you don't need a GPA. If you don't need a GPA, then what do you actually need? Well, you need work experience, you need all this sort of stuff, right? So, and what happens to schools? It'll be different, and my view of a potential future school or educational institute will be no professors, just guides, because you can learn anything off of YouTube, like Coursera, Udemy, all that sort of stuff has the free courses now. There are great schools and courses at universities too, but sometimes it's not about sitting in front of a professor for a 3-hour lecture. It's about, okay, and what do you do with it afterwards? That's the important part. So I'm looking for people to kind of aspirationally, again, catalyze and do something different, and saying that if you want to do more, you can. Especially the ones that are kind of middle-aged, like myself, is that, well, if you think about it, if you take the typical retirement age, 65, right? And even if you're 40, you have a good 25 years left, right? Sure, you could keep coasting for the next 25 years, or why not do something with that, right? So again, just changing the conversation and hopefully inspiring folks to do more than they would have otherwise dreamed they can do, because I have a firm belief that everyone has huge potential and greatness inside them. It's just that they're choosing to hold themselves back.
Right.
Or something in their past has caused them to be held back, whether it's, again, parents or culture or whatever. So what I try to do is kind of pull away the layers and say, okay, well, let's let you shine, right? As cheesy as that sounds. But get the real you out into the world, and for all the amazing stuff that you should be doing, right? So I'm a constant learner. I have by no means figured this stuff out. I'm along the journey to do that. But every time I listen to and hear something new, it's one like, oh, people should know about this. And again, it's not a broad brush stroke where everyone should do this. It's just, okay, that DJ for personal development, this might work for you. This might work for you, this might work for you, this might not, right? So giving people kind of the options and the resources is one of my goals.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of like actually, now you're at the position, like you said, of, now it's about saying, what am I saying no to and what am I saying yes to? What was the process like of actually building your brand up to that point? Like personally, that's something I'm in the process of, and also it's something I'm finding is quite challenging just because I've never had to do that in any of my previous roles. Like consulting doesn't really teach me how to do a lot of marketing for a company. And so I'd be curious to hear like what your own personal journey was like in terms of, how am I going to market myself? Am I going to do a lot of social media marketing? Am I going to be focusing on specific content that I want to unleash? Like, was the book the big part of how you wanted to do your marketing strategy?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd probably write another book on stuff I wish I knew earlier on building my brand stuff, because I made it up. I had no idea. I'm not a trained marketer, and some of that stuff I try to get from other resources. So kind of like the Gary V's of the world, I try to do what I can. But although he says a lot of stuff, I should be doing more. So essentially, what I look to do is figure out like what is that the service or the value that I want to provide, right? And most folks in the entrepreneur journey, they recommend you to figure out what is your initial niche starting market, right? The 1,000 true fans, that sort of thing, and figuring out who are those people that like 100% of that tiny market would love for your support. And it took me a while to kind of get through that, because I was trying to, I wanted to help the millennials. Again, you've got a job in your degree of study or whatever, and you realize you don't like doing it. Well, once you graduate, it's hard to get at those people, because there's no one consistent place where they all kind of hang out. They kind of disperse and go everywhere. So I actually had to go further down, where I was helping more schools, because, well, you graduate pretty quickly. So if I hit you at fourth year, then you'll remember when you graduate that was me, or that person that was in that talk on campus, that Luki guy. And well, while you're there, I might as well help you with a few things. So it was trying to figure out, okay, where are the areas that came to me? And then it's trying to figure out, okay, what did I want to take on? Because I have a lot of recruiting experience. Do I want to take newcomers? A lot of newcomers were coming my way. Well, that seems like easy cash, easy money type of thing, because people would pay for like resume reviews or coaching or whatever. And it's like, well, that's not really the demographic that I want to go for. Like, although, well, I'm trying to find like partners to figure out, well, is that a place where you want to tackle, right? So it's really trying to figure out like who are the people that I truly want to serve, and then what do they want, right? I was very poor on social media. I think I really only got on LinkedIn maybe like 2 years ago, and I was on it longer, but I only got a Facebook account like 2 years ago, and that was just more to kind of save the name in case I had to develop my brand, that sort of thing. So it's really getting used to putting yourself out there, because I'm naturally an introvert. So posting gave me a lot of anxiety, like what do people think and all that sort of stuff. But you do it enough, and it kind of allows you to, again, be a little bit more confident. Nobody's really listening / nobody's really commenting, but once in a while someone says a positive thing. Once in a while you get a like, and it makes you feel good, and then you get more and more and more and more. So it was kind of evolving that, and then picking the different areas that I wanted to focus on, because at some point I want to do one-on-one coaching, right? And then at some point, no, just for the schools. No, I want to do it for businesses. No, I want to do it for whatever. So really figuring out which areas did I want to play in, because there's only so many hours in the day, right? Especially with all the stuff that's going on. Where do I want to really spend that extra hour that I have? And then what is kind of the branding, the messaging around that? So the book came about really just because I was, when I was having a coffee with someone, I would be saying the same 60-70% of the same stuff. So I could probably press play and okay, take a look at that. So I wrote it just more of a, hey, why not? Before you talk to me, read this book, and then we can have coffee. There's no money in books, so if you want to go down that route, don't do it to get money. I've heard that a lot of people are treating it like the new business card, right? Because people take business cards, they kind of throw it away. Most people don't throw away books, right? So it's always there, sitting on the shelf, and it's a bit of a reminder of something, of that person that you met, and oh, you know what, I might look them up. So, and part of it was a bit of like an ego thing to say, I never thought I'd write a book, right? But I did. So what else did I think I would never do that now I can do? So it was a bit of that, and just timing. It seemed right. Yeah, so it's figuring out like, who am I? So I did a couple of iterations. I was like Toronto's millennial career coach, and the DJ for personal development, the career catalyst, the personal trainer for careers. All of those different things kind of evolved based on different discussions that I've had. So it's kind of an additive DJing my own message out to other folks. So it's really trying to figure out like what value that you're trying to provide. And I'd encourage you is, again, pick that target niche market, get those 1,000 true fans, and then figure out how to expand from that. Because I did a little bit more. No, I can help everyone, right? And by doing that, there's an expression like, if you're everything to everyone, then you're nothing to no one. So that was kind of, it fell flat, because I would used to use Facebook ads and kind of target everybody, but now I'm doing a little bit more targeted, right? So it's getting a better results. So all the stuff that again, most of the people out there say, but I don't need to listen to that. I can do things on my own, because everyone wants this sort of stuff, right? So part of it is just getting past my own ego too, or whatever. It might not be ego, whatever it is that's kind of saying that I'm different and I need to be right? And yeah, so the journey it's evolving. I'm still evolving. I don't think I have my own brand, and what I also want to do is detach my own personal brand from my company brand, because I was always introverted. I didn't want to be in the spotlight, so I always try to focus the brand. But then I realized that people were coming to me. People weren't necessarily coming to the brand, so I had to kind of embrace that, to say, hey, you know what, I will do this stuff. I will do the speaking stuff. I will do whatever. Like, I'm not a natural public speaker, but I do it because it gives me, getting me in front of 40 people, 100 people, and a real connection versus just like a Facebook ad or LinkedIn ad or whatever it is. So yeah, it's the testing and trying and seeing it works, and being comfortable, being uncomfortable, that sort of thing, and putting yourself out there, right? So that's kind of the gradual evolution of the brand. And I don't even know if I have a brand yet, but it's definitely something that's evolving and something that I want to develop, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And in terms of like things like speaking, or even as you like decided to start charging for coaching, and it's like the one-on-one or even like the groups, like what was it like getting your first client when you asked for the first paid client? How'd that go?
Well, a lot of it is, oh, okay, you want to pay for this? Is really that thing. And again, part of it is the mindset where I totally undercharged, right? I had the initial one was like $1 a day, right, for coaching. So coaching someone for a year for like $365, that was probably not a great idea, even though kind of the industry average is like $100 or $200 an hour, right? But I was like, no, I want to help people. I would do this for free, but if I got paid $1 a day, that would be good enough, right? So that's not a great mentality, or at least from a business savvy perspective, to have on it. So really balancing for me the wanting to help versus the needing to keep a roof over my kids' heads, that type of thing, was a challenge. But I mean, it was definitely gratifying in terms of being able to say, oh, someone is willing to pay for this. Now, it was not going too far, because there were a couple people who, oh, you're willing to pay, so I started increasing my prices, and then figuring, okay, what is the cutoff between what people will kind of easily say yes to, and what people will kind of start balking at. And but also using that as a filter criteria, because sometimes the clients that I would take is like, well, you're not really committed to this. You're just doing it because it's cheap, right? And do I want you? And I had kind of a mindset that no, I can help everyone, but sometimes I don't have the tools or the experience yet to help that person. I still believe I can help that person, but not necessarily at this moment. So it's trying to figure out, okay, who do I truly want to help, and focusing on selling to the people who want versus the unsellable, as people talk about it, and seeing again who's gonna most benefit from the value that I provide. But yeah, I mean, getting the first client was always awesome, and like first paid speaking engagements, like maybe I should have charged more for that one too. And then it's trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? Because again, my biggest challenge is like I would do this for free, for fun, right? But again, I still have to balance the other stuff. So it's making sure that I am kind of positioning the brand appropriately in terms of value and stuff, in order to be out and saying that I am equivalent, if not better, than these other people out there, even though I might be a little bit less expensive, right? So those are some of the things that I had to consider along the way.
Yeah, no, and I think it's just like the organic process, right? Of just, it just comes up naturally, and you go, how to think about doing this?
Mm-hmm.
How to think about doing this?
Yeah, I mean, you have a financial background, so you're probably modeling and pricing all these different things. You know how to do that. For me, it's just like I did like technology, I did like purchasing stuff. I never had to really do it, so I had to kind of get up to speed. And yeah, I picked up a couple of things like, okay, I might try this. So and I've been kind of piloting like different models as well, where I think it's hopefully going to focus on like adding value versus just being like an hourly type rate. So yeah, continuing to evolve.
Right. And right now you've been running Focus.Inspired for about 3 years, and do you feel that you're kind of hitting that mark where you're seeing the mark of, okay, I think I could be financially okay as well. Like, I don't have to be as stressed as I was like in the first 2 years of just starting it up? Yeah,
I mean, I have a bunch of opportunities that I'm looking to close that will definitely do that for me. And it's just a matter of, are they going to be the right opportunities, right? Because sometimes there's money for the sake of money versus like money for the ambitions that I want. So it's a balance where I think I'm there. I'm getting to that point for sure, and even in the near future, I'm hoping it'll be a little more even than what I was making before, because I do believe I'm adding a ton of value for folks, and I think I'm probably even undervaluing myself. So I really need to get past that my own mental hurdles and really embracing that abundance mindset type of thing in order to kind of fully realize all of the different potentials. But yeah, I think in very short order, I'm going to be kind of matching what I used to make as a management consultant type of thing, and yeah, but it took a bunch of work to get there. So.
Right, work that you love.
Yeah, work
thankfully.
that I love. Yeah, and my wife says that I don't work any less, but at least the work that I'm doing is all for me, right? Because yeah, I work long hours in management consulting. I work long hours now, but at least it's all for me, right? So it's great.
And so if you were to look at Focus.Inspired as a business that we so often analyze in consulting, how is the kind of segmentation done in terms of like time or like the revenue? Like, is it mostly one-on-one coaching in terms of like 50% one-on-one coaching? I also know that you teach at Centennial College as well, so is that, what percentage of that?
It's a mix, and depends on the time of day or the way the winds blow type of thing. But I like to have it in a couple of buckets, ideally equal, but it's always depending on projects and contracts and stuff like that. So there's the one-on-one individual coaching, right? There's the kind of workshops and talks that I do. And sometimes they're larger programs, sometimes they're with schools, sometimes they're with businesses, and then there's kind of the content stuff that's creating. Well, that one is more like marketing and a bit of a loss leader right now, and the other two are really what makes more of the money. But it's one where like it's an investment in the company because it's brand building, it's content producing, and then it helps with the other two, right? So ideally I'd want like a an equal split amongst the three. But it kind of ebbs and flows based on, well, I had a new deal that closed and we're going to do it for the next 4 months, or we're going to do this for the next year or whatever it is, and I'll sign you up as a client for there. And then oftentimes they're job focused, so I usually do like, hey, you landed your job, and then we go into like a sustainment mode where instead of meeting them on a weekly basis, I might meet them on a monthly or a quarterly basis, right? So they're still a client, but a less involved client, right? So there's different things, but ideally I try to keep the three. The content piece is a recent addition where I didn't really do much of that. The only thing was the book, but I want to try to be more, and you probably see more active on like social media, on like creating YouTube videos, hopefully starting my own podcast at some point, and trying to just get myself more out there, right, and hopefully building a small team around that helps me. I think you're trying to do that too, to automate some of the administrative parts of it, so that you can focus on kind of the content and putting it out there, right? So that's ideally how I'd spend my time, but it's probably going to shift and adjust because, just depending on the way the wind blows, right?
Right, and given how what you're doing is so nuanced to a lot of people, I'm sure your friends have all these assumptions about, so this is what your life is probably like, and so. What is the most common misconception that you get when you catch up with your friends now?
I guess it's it's the entrepreneurial thing. So you have a ton of free time because you make your own hours and whatever. So you got availability to do that for sure. It's so much easier because you're just working for yourself, right? Versus you got to hustle and grind in order to build that foundation for yourself. But I think they're starting to understand because, again, I'm interacting with them and I try to help them as much as I can and share. But I try to separate that a little bit in the terms of like, well, I don't want to be the coaching person there unless they're asking for it. I don't want to force it upon them. But at the same time, like I see, they have tons of potential, right? And they're my buddies, so I want them to be successful. So it's always balancing that where like when we're having dinner, when we're going out, whatever, that I don't go into coaching mode and trying to help people, right? Versus let's just hang out, right? So it's a bit of balancing on that. So I think most of them know what I do, especially now that I'm starting to get more on social media. They see all this stuff. It's like, okay, he's doing another event, he's doing another YouTube video, he's doing another whatever. I think they're just trying to wrap their heads around it. But most of them are dealing with their own stuff, so they don't worry about me too much. So.
Do you ever go into coaching mode on your wife?
I try not to. It's one of those things. Well, yeah, you do what you want to do, but let me live my life, type of thing. It's like, there's, and for whatever reason comes to mind, the aspect of in coaching. There's one either being a tugboat, right? So with your friend, just like through brute force, like pulling along, versus being a lighthouse, right? Both of them accomplish the same thing, where they get the ship safely into harbor, but one just shines brightly and does an awesome job and lets people kind of come to him versus you pulling them out. So I aim to be the lighthouse and just say, this is all the stuff that I'm doing, because I have like taking my health more seriously. I have my exercise and like more smoothies and stuff like that, like better food choices, and I try to do that, and she can do whatever she wants, right? I don't force that upon her. I don't necessitate that for her, but I think she's trying to incorporate some of that, whatever she deems is appropriate for her, right?
Yeah, it's a struggle that I constantly have in my relationship, and it's something like it's continued work in progress, constantly trying to find the harmony between what I do and what my girlfriend does.
Yeah, it's one where, again, be that lighthouse and say, okay, this is the benefits it's provided for me, and if you want those benefits, then let's talk about it. If you don't, cool. It's really your life to live, right? So.
Yeah, no, totally. And so as we kind of wrap up to the final rounds of the interview, mm-hmm. The kind of key questions I'd like to ask each guest is, the first one is, what's a belief that you have that you think goes against conventional wisdom? And I'm sure you have a lot, but what's one that sticks out? Yeah,
I don't know how conventional it is, because I know times are changing and people have more options, but it's a little bit of that conveyor belt of life type of thing, where you're expected to do a degree, get a good job, a stable job, get married, 2 kids, and a house in the suburbs, that type of thing, right? So part of it is just exploring those options where now, again, multiple career paths are a common thing, that the entrepreneurial / freelance, the whatever things are options, and also like the value of school, right? There's a Mark Twain quote, I think, is like, don't let school get in the way of education, because oftentimes school is there, and yeah, it serves its purpose for a certain set of people, but oftentimes you would learn way more and faster doing something else, right? So being open to those challenges, and again, I think that's one of those big elephants in the room that a lot of people know that, but they're just not willing to acknowledge it yet, because it's just the way that it's done. Like, everyone has to get a degree and has to do this. It's like, well, you spend 4 years and whatever learning marketing or accounting or whatever, but you've never done it. Like, do you actually know? I usually use the analogy of like swimming, right? Did you read the book on swimming, right? And did you learn everything in a classroom, or were you in the pool, right? Most people you can only learn so much while academically doing it, and versus like get in the water and just go back and forth, do a couple of links, and then that's when you get good. So yeah, hopefully it's so I guess the conventional wisdom is like education / the conveyor belt of life, and saying that there are way more options and possibilities out there than people realize and recognize.
Yeah, I think the quote that comes to mind is from Yogi Berra, where he says, in theory, practice and theory are the same, but in practice, it's not.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And so if 20-year-old Luki were to look at where you are now, so the Luki from 3rd year U of T, I guess, still in computer science, was to look at what you're doing and where you are at, what do you think his emotional reaction would be?
Well, I actually told people this a couple of times, where like if I were to tell myself in 2nd, 3rd, 4th year that I was now a career coach, I'd be very dismissive. I'd be like, yeah, what are you smoking, right? It's definitely not something I'd consider. And then hopefully I would have turned into, I think I probably would have sensed a little bit of fear, in the sense that, holy crap, you're doing all this stuff. That means that I'm going to have to like be more out, do some talks and talk to people and all that sort of stuff. And then at some point, I hope I'd get into like some excitement in terms of, hey, that's kind of cool. I mean, future Luki seems to be pretty happy, so hopefully there was a good journey in order to get there. So yeah, it's initially dismissive, and then hopefully excited by the end of the conversation. So
yeah, no, that's a funny one. And you wrote the book, stuff I wish I knew earlier. Mm-hmm. But if you were to give advice to that 20-year-old Luki, and you couldn't just throw this book at him, is there particular advice that you'd want him to heed?
Well, so there's the advice I'd given. Whether he'd listen or not is probably the other part of it. But I would start probably with that kind of that North Star thing. It's like, are you the one steering the ship, right? Because a lot of it is the assumption that, yeah, I'm doing it because I like it, it's kind of expected of me or whatever, versus like, is this really what you wanted to do? Because how would it have been different? Because I was always interested in people and psychology and all that sort of stuff. But again, because that wasn't as reputable as like engineering and technology, at least in my circle of friends, then it wasn't something that I seriously considered, right? But I did enjoy those types of courses and that type of learning. So maybe like having that bit of self reflection and introspection to say, hey, are you doing this because of you, or are you doing this because of some other factor, right? And hopefully by planting that seed, at some point I would have figured it out earlier than whatever, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Excellent. Great. No, thanks so much for giving me your time. I know it's
great.
Expensive and probably rising in price. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
No, I think this is great, and I appreciate that, and hopefully it is helpful to you. And yeah, I look forward to getting to know you more and kind of watching you in your own journey and seeing how you evolve.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so for some of our listeners, who want to get in touch with you or want to learn more about Focus.Inspired, how can they reach you or reach the company? Yeah,
so most social media, I'm Luki Danu. I don't make people spell the whole name. LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. The website is Focus.Inspired.com. yeah, I'm looking to do more stuff on like Instagram, YouTube, eventually creating podcasts, but the book's available on Amazon, Indigo, that sort of thing, if folks are interested, and hopefully writing the Young Professionals edition soon, and looking for collaborators on that. But yeah, I'm pretty accessible over LinkedIn. I usually accept all requests, though I do send you a message to say like, hey, how could I be of help? Because I'd like to try to keep my connections known, and I've given myself a deadline by the end of the year that I'm going to start actually removing and culling the people who haven't responded back. So yeah, so hopefully that is a little bit of motivation for folks to actually respond, because I think networking is and all that sort of stuff is important, building relationships, but only if it's like a reciprocal, like kind of two-way street, right? So I'd love it if people kind of interact, and more than happy to help how I can. I have some availability constraints at times, but if I could be of help, then feel free to reach out.
Great. No, thanks so much, Luki.
Perfect. Thanks, Daniel.
Okay, have a good one. So thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please check out other episodes, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date for the future episodes. Also, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, whichever is applicable to you. To see past episodes, you can go to oldmandan.com/podcasts. Also, you can sign up to my weekly newsletter on my blog, oldmandan.com/newsletter. You can stay up to date with future podcast episodes that way, and included in the newsletter are my book reviews I write, my weekly article related to the domain of self-development systems, as well as 7 things I learned throughout the week on being healthy, wealthy, and wise. Finally, special thanks to icons8.com for allowing me to use their music, Tiny People, on the podcast. Great. I will see you all next time. Take care.